There are those in the hobby that say, don't chase the numbers. Then there are those that say that we should set and maintain target numbers for our parameters. And if we don't, we do it at our own peril.
The numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you.
I personally feel that it is a must that we maintain a reasonable idea of what the chemistry is in our tanks. Now, am I of the thought that automated testing is essential to maintain a successful tank? No. But at the same time, I'm not going to put down those who run an Alkatronic or a Mastertronic, a Triton or a Cage Director, or some other automated testing solution that I'm just not thinking of right now. You see, with these tools, hobbyists are able to test their water practically as many times a day as they want, and for multiple of parameters as well. But for me, and I'm sure the vast majority of hobbyists, testing takes place manually. So that's what I would like to go over in this video. Let's walk through a battery of water parameter test on my tank. Now, this testing is not as granular as an ICP test, but it does cover the most critical parameters in a reef tank. Now, to start with, let's look at the calcium test. Calcium is a very basic and critical mineral component to growing successfully stony corals in our tank. I use and have used for the longest time the Red Sea calcium test. There's a few steps to it, but I consider it to be more than workable. In fact, the instructions are included on the card that comes with the test. We start off here by taking some tank sample water. The test does come with a syringe. I just have gotten so used to using my own syringe with things, but in this case I'll use the syringe that came with the test. Just as a form of habit, I always tend to shoot the water out a couple of times and bring the bottom of the black plunger to the 5 milliliter line. Take the testing vial. I will say with this calcium test, over time you'll have a buildup of residue over time, and it's good to periodically clean that off by just filling it with vinegar and giving it a reasonable amount of time to soak. Now, once we added our sample water, we want to add 5 drops of the reagent A, and with most, if not all, liquid reagents, it's always a good idea to mix it up. Give it a good shake, especially if you haven't used it for a while. And we add 5 drops. This is a really tight jar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Either that or I'm just getting weaker as I get older, or it could be both. Give it a swirl. Now the test says to swirl it for 10 seconds, but we can tell if it's got a good mixture to it. Okay, next we add a level scoop of reagent B to it. This one recommends swirling for 20 seconds. The reagent B primarily serves the purpose of a color indicator for the titration that follows. Okay, that's thoroughly mixed. And then the titration reagent, we add 1 milliliter to the supplied syringe. And again, I always pull it through at least a couple of times to get any air bubbles out, just to make sure that we have the proper amount. And bring the bottom of the black plunger to the 1 milliliter line. And for this, I'm going to play it safe and put on some glasses if I can find them. Naturally, I had a hard time finding them. They were in my pocket. Okay. Now, let's do this one more time to make sure we get it right. Pushing it down to the 1 milliliter mark. A couple of taps and inserting it into the titration tool with the numbers and gradients showing here. So that will just screw the test vial on and shake it while slowly pushing the plunger, and we're looking for a change from the magenta to a solid blue. Not purple, but a solid blue. And we'll stop at the point that we actually have the solid blue, which is here. Sometimes with the titration, you give it a few seconds, the color will change back. But in this case, it's not happening, and we have a solid blue. And here, I can see we've used 0.68 milliliters. And if we look on the back of the card, 0.68 comes to, wow, a calcium level of 340. Wow, that's low. Okay, so I'll have to just squirt the rest of it into the test vial. So I'll have to be doing some calcium supplementation in order to get it back up to the desired level of almost 100 ppm higher than it currently is. Now let's look at alkalinity. Now alkalinity is, in my opinion, one of, if not the most important parameter that we can test for. Now for alkalinity, I use 2 different tests to determine alkalinity levels in the tank. I utilize the Saliford test kit, and as well I utilize a Hannah checker. In particular with the Hannah checker, I use the ppm version of the checker. You see, with that version, it requires just a little bit of math to get the commonly used DKH reading, but it's a simple calculation and actually yields a more specific, more granular test result for your alkalinity. Now, to get started, we will start with, and I'm going to do both tests. We're going to start with the Salifert test. Now, the Salifert test has just 2 reagents. First, we start with, and again, the test comes with a syringe for getting sample water. The standard Salifert test requires 4 milliliters of tank water, into those 4 milliliters of tank water, we add 4 drops of the indicator reagent. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mix it, and this test is a titration test as well. And as with the case with the Red Sea test, we want to draw up 1 milliliter of the titration solution and adjust the bottom of the black plunger to the 1 milliliter line. And we start the titration. I admit I give credit to the Red Sea titration kit in that it's a one-handed titration process, whereas Salifert, you got to do it with 2 hands, unless we're going to utilize some magnetic stirrer that I've seen folks use with these tests. But you keep getting or adding drops until you get a color change to a peach color, which pretty much is, one more drop, where it's at now. And with the Salifert test, I'll get the reference card out. You determine how much is left. And here I'm looking at 4.246. 4.6 milliliters left. 4.46 milliliters. I'll get it right eventually. Which gives me an alkalinity, according to this, of 8.3. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this compares to the Hannah checker. So I'll get rid of the rest of the titration reagent, pour that in our waste cup. Give it a little rinse. Salifert kit aside and try it with the Hannah checker. Now the Hannah checker, that looks kind of dirty. Let me clean the vial real quick. It's always recommended that we keep these vials as clean as we possibly can. Fortunately, it comes with two. And this second one looks a little cleaner than the first one. I'll have to do some work with that first one. And with the Hannah checker, it requires 10 milliliters of tank water, so bring the plunger to the 10 milliliter line and add it to the vial. You know you have it right when the water line, or the bottom, the meniscus that has a slight curve, is the part that touches the white indicator line, which lets you know it's 10 milliliters. I'm just getting rid of some little micro bubbles on the side, and I'm going to do a quick shirt wipe on the vial. Actually, I see something floating around in here, so I'm going to discard that sample water and get a fresh syringe of it. Don't know what that was. That looks better. Quick wipe one time. Now with the Hannah egg, or at least that's what a lot of people call them, press it once, turn it on, you get the C1 indicator where you put it in, press, it'll blink a few times and should give us C2. Still blinking. Okay, now C2 is there, and we'll get the reagent, give it a little shake, and here we want 1 milliliter of the alkalinity reagent. Pull up, push down once, pull up again, push down bottom of the plunger to the 1 milliliter line. Take it out. Add the reagent. I always just draw back and shoot one more time just to make sure I get all of the reagent out. Top on, invert 5 or 6 times to make sure it's mixed properly. I'll give it one more shirt wipe. And put it in. Press the button one time and should be in a few seconds. I have an indication of the alkalinity, and that's 142 parts per million. So if I were to break out a calculator, and I'm doing this on the PC in front of me that's off camera, the calculation is 0.003 times the parts per million number you get on the calculator. So at 142 times 0.003, excuse me, that's entirely incorrect. That's the calculation for the phosphate checker or the phosphorus checker. For alkalinity, the calculation is 0.056. So let's try that again. 142 times 0.056. According to the HANA, I have an alkalinity of 7.952. So a little bit of a difference from the 8.6 that the Salifert test gave me. It's always good sometimes to have a second opinion on things. Now, between the two, which one do I, or what I consider to be more of a authoritative test? Personally, I probably lean towards the HANA checker because of the fact that the Salifert is a titration test, and to a degree depends on the human eye. So I am not infallible, so I would tend to lean towards maybe that my alkalinity is more so rounded up 8 DKH as opposed to 8.6. And with the Salifert titration, the bottom line is the more titrant solution, titration solution you use, the higher your alkalinity may be. And so I may have taken it a drop or two further than the color actually indicated, and so it may have come a little closer to what the HANA checker was seeing. But options. Now let's look at nitrate. Now again, as with the alkalinity test, I used two different tests to get the nitrate levels in the tank. I used the API nitrate test kit, and I have another HANA checker for nitrate. In this case, it's the HANA high range test kit. Actually, truth be told, I had 3 test kits for nitrate. There is a third one. That's the HANA low range test kit. Now, honestly, I have never used this test kit. In fact, I purchased it shortly after it came on the market, once HANA released it. But upon realizing the level of complexity just to run a nitrate test with this kit, it literally never got used, not even once. In fact, this test kit only is good for measuring nitrate levels below 5 ppm. Now, I may do a video demonstrating the level of effort in using this checker, but the fact is, I believe that it takes more than 20 minutes just to perform a successful nitrate test using this kit. So this one for me is off the table. Now, I also have a interesting situation here with the nitrate test kits, in that I can and often do combine the two kits to perform one test, because there was an article on the Reef Builders website a while back pointing this out, that you can use the reagent from the API test kit with the HANA checker, and there may be a variance as compared to what the HANA's native reagent would give you as a result, but it's maybe plus or minus 10 or 15%. But honestly, I can live with that level of uncertainty with my nitrate number. If it's as much as 15%, okay, it's the difference between my test result being 10 or 8.5. And really, that's not such a critical difference to me. Now, to get started, in fact, I'm going to only do one test, and I'm going to use the nitrate reagents from the API test kit. Now, the HANA comes with these powder reagents. I'm down to my last one, and I just want to hold on to that for now until I reorder some more. But using the API test kit actually is a more cost-effective way of doing it, because I can buy another API test kit for, I think it's about $16, and that's good for 90 tests. Whereas if you get the refills for the reagent for the HANA checker, you get 25 of them, and I think it may be about $19 for the 25 tests. In theory, yes, but probably in practice as well, using the HANA reagent is a more accurate one if you really need that granular level of accuracy. But for me, since I'm only trying to keep my nitrates in a range, ideally 5 parts per million, no more than 10 parts per million, the API test kit is good enough, or the reagents are good enough for me. So to get started, we want to again get some tank water, 10 milliliters of tank water. Plunge it down to the 10 milliliter line. Fill the reagent. And now, API kit, which comes with 2 reagents, bottle 1 and bottle 2. I'll give it a shake. Bottle 1, and add 10 drops of reagent 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And yes, I do count out loud, because I really doubt there's any of us who hasn't been momentarily distracted and lost count and then had to do the whole thing all over again. So I inverted a few times in order to get it mixed up well. Give it a shirt wipe. Take the Hannah checker. Turn it on where it's C1. Push the button. Wait for it to indicate C2. Okay. And now add reagent number 2, and there's 10 drops of that as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Invert several times in order to get it fully mixed. One other reason why I'm only doing this test one time is because the nitrate test is a 7-minute test where it waits to see the reagent change color. We'll give it one more shirt wipe. Put it in, and this time hold the button down until we see a countdown start. And it counts down from 7 minutes. After that, it should give us our nitrate results. Now with the API test kit, if I were to just use that, these test kits come with an indicator card where you're going to compare the color in the vial to the colors on this card to get an approximation of your nitrate levels in the tank. And again, it's relying on the human eye to get an accurate reading. Me personally, I'd like a number. And while this test is counting down, we can always move on to some other tests. Tests that hardly take as long. In fact, let's see. If I get a fresh jar of sample water here, since we've already gone through one, we can test for salinity, and for that I use another Hannah checker. That's the Hannah salinity tester. It's something that literally takes seconds to do. I will say, if you're going to be using one of these, it's always good to keep it calibrated. It's not practical to calibrate it every time you use it, but if you use it on a regular basis, recalibrate it at least once every couple months or so. Because I recently recalibrated this and found that there was a significant drift in the reading. So with this, I just hit the power button, it turns on, gives you the battery level, which is 97%, and a specific gravity of 1.000, and my room temperature is 79.2 degrees. All you have to do, just dip it in tank water. I tend to shake it a little just to remove any bubbles that may be on the reading, on the probes. And with this, I have a reading. It's still confirming but I have a salinity. I don't know how well the camera's picking it up, but it's a salinity of 1.025, which is fine for me because, in fact, that's where I had been targeting my salinity lately. I'm just trying to determine with my goniopora if they were a little bit unhappy with 1.026, so I dropped it down a little. Now, normally you want to rinse these off right away in RODI or at worst under a tap, just so you don't have the salt drying on it. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. Be right back. And I'm back. And we still have 2.5 minutes to go on the nitrate test. So I figure while we're still waiting for that, we will utilize our time further and perform a phosphate test. With the Hanna checkers, again, they standardize it needing 10 milliliters of water. With the phosphate test, or in this case, phosphorus ultra low range, it utilizes a powder reagent minute 12 left on the nitrate test. And the phosphorus, I'll give another shirt wipe. Remove one of the packets. The phosphorus test. It's interesting, it's the same reagent for the phosphorus ultra low range as well as the phosphate test. It's just the Hanna checker is doing a calculation for you in the background to convert the phosphorus levels to phosphate. With these, I just kind of bend them up so that they act as a little funnel. Now, turn on the checker, have it go to C1. Put it in, press the button, wait for it to C2, and the nitrate test has finished, and it's giving me a nitrate level of 8.3. Again, I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but that's the result, and it's within the acceptable range of nitrate. And just pour this in. I know a lot of people say don't worry about getting every little bit in there, but you know, my thought is the engineers at Hanna put a specific amount in here for a reason, and I'll get all that I can out of it. In fact, I spilled just a few granules here. The checker gives you only so long to get this mixed for the second part of the test. I don't know if it's 2 minutes or 4 minutes, but I think it's somewhere in that range. I know usually I like to always have my reagent already open and folded, ready to go as soon as I see C2 come up on the checker. And you want to give this thorough shake. You don't go crazy, but you want to make sure the reagent is well mixed. And again, you're on the clock, so if that C2 disappears, the checker's just going to turn off and you'll have to start all over again. Now what I do, I just try to make sure after shaking I don't see any of the little granules from the reagent floating around in the mixture. To make sure they've all been dissolved into the solution. And looking at this, I think that's good. And I ran out of time. So I gotta start all over again. Okay, and I got that test on its way. And that's a 3-minute test. And once it's finished, it will give us the results of phosphorus in the water in terms of parts per billion. Now, while I do that, let's test magnesium. And magnesium it's the one test that I just don't perform all that often. Realistically, I probably don't test magnesium any more than maybe twice a year at the most. And for this test, I use the Red Sea Magnesium Pro test kit. Part of the reason I don't test it all that often is, to be honest, I find it a little annoying. The process of testing for magnesium. Got nothing against the Red Sea kit, but just the steps you have to go through seem a bit tedious to me. Out here, trying to get things going if I were normally testing, and that's getting the titration syringe filled as the first step in the process, even though it's the last step in testing. Just want to get it out of the way. And it comes with a card, and with this requires 2 milliliters of water. I had to check because, as I said, I don't test this all that often, and I don't have the muscle memory for the steps in this test. So 2 milliliters of tank water, and there's about 15 seconds left on the phosphate test. Get those results while in the middle of the magnesium test. So 2 milliliters of water into the test vial, and the phosphate test is complete, and according to this, I have 3 parts per billion of phosphorus in the tank water. That surprises me a little, given the fact that I feed Reefroids, which is basically phosphate in a bottle, to a lot of people. Now, I'll perform the calculation and use the correct formula this time. 3 parts per billion times 0.003, and so with a reading of 3 parts per billion, again, the correct phosphate level comes out to 0.009, which actually is a little low, considering the fact that I've been feeding Reef, so I guess I need to feed a little more in order to keep the phosphate from bottoming out. And now for the final test, it's magnesium. Now we already have our 2 milliliters of tank water in the test vial, and what we do next is shake up the reagent A, and according to the instructions for this, and I have to refer back to it because again I don't test for magnesium all that often. The process is to add 1 drop of reagent A, shake it for 15 seconds or so, and I don't know how many times I've forgotten this process and just dropped all 5 in there. Okay, add drop number 2. And mix it again. Now, probably not quite hitting 15 seconds, but okay. Now, following that, we add 5 drops of reagent B. All at once. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now we add the titrator onto the vial, and we just start a slow shake and we'll drop it until it turns blue. And that appears to be one more drop. Okay, that's blue, and look here, we find that we have used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.6. Wow, 5.6 milliliters brings us to a magnesium level of 1120. Wow. Okay, so I will be dosing a boatload of magnesium recently. Okay, and just putting the rest of it in there. There's no change, so I think we're pretty accurate. And that's testing. Now, I will definitely say that there is a definite benefit in knowing what our numbers are, whether we're chasing some or not chasing. Still, knowing the numbers in our tank can help avoid disaster. Well, my name is Ed. Thanks for watching, and take care.
Do